You stupid girl. How dare you quit your job and block the cards? Who's going to pay my mortgage now? And who's going to support my son? He's unemployed too, my mother-in-law shrieked. But she couldn't even imagine what I was about to do next. And before we begin, I'd like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy the story. Laura sat in a coffee shop across from her office building in downtown Chicago, scrawling the final lines onto her letter of resignation. The pen glided confidently, without a single smudge. She reread the text, folded the sheet into quarters, and tucked it into her purse. Her cappuccino had gone cold, but she hadn't even touched it. Outside, an October drizzle misted the city. People hurried along the sidewalks about their business, but for the first time in months, Laura's mind was perfectly clear. Her phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number with an Ohio area code. Laura answered and heard a woman's voice introducing herself as Miss Albright, an estate attorney. She was calling about Aunt Carol, her father's older sister, whom Laura had last seen a decade ago at some family reunion. Her aunt had lived in Cleveland, single and reclusive, and rarely spoke to anyone in the family. The woman on the other end of the line informed her that Carol had passed away 3 weeks ago and that Laura was named as the sole heir. A 2-bedroom condo in a decent Cleveland neighborhood and a small bank account with about $50,000. She would need to travel there to sign the paperwork and claim the inheritance. Laura hung up and leaned back in her chair. A condo in another city that no one knew about. Not her husband, Mark, nor his mother, Brenda. She gazed out the window at the gray sky, and suddenly, she felt something click inside her. This wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was an exit strategy. Laura finished her cold coffee and was about to leave when she overheard a conversation from the next table. 2 women in their 50s were sitting by the window, one complaining to the other about her daughter-in-law. Can you believe it? She supported him for 4 years. My David kept saying he was going on interviews, that he was just about to land a job. But he'd arranged it all with a buddy of his. The guy works in HR somewhere, and he would call periodically, putting on a whole performance over the phone. My daughter-in-law heard these calls and believed her husband was trying, but he was just sitting at home all day playing video games. How did she find out? She randomly ran into that buddy on the street and thanked him for getting David an interview, and the guy had no idea what she was talking about. It all came out. She filed for divorce a month later. Laura froze with her purse in her hand. Mark had been out of work for 5 months. Layoffs, he had said. They restructured the department. Since then, every morning he would get dressed and leave, supposedly for interviews and meetings with recruiters. He'd return 3 or 4 hours later, sharing details about the questions they asked and how they promised to call back, but not a single offer had materialized in 5 months. She left the coffee shop and walked back to her office, but her thoughts were far from her work. Laura was a financial analyst at a large real estate development firm. Her salary was $150,000 a year, plus quarterly bonuses. Her income had been entirely supporting their lives for the past few months. Rent for their apartment was $2,500, utilities around $400, and groceries and other expenses were at least another $1,500 minimum. And then there were Brenda's regular requests for help. Sitting down at her desk, Laura logged into her online banking. She and Mark had a joint checking account where she transferred money for monthly expenses. She usually didn't scrutinize the transactions, trusting her husband, but now something compelled her to open the transaction history. The first thing that caught her eye was a series of regular charges to gaming platforms: Steam, PlayStation Network, Xbox. Charges of $30 to $50, but very frequent. Laura scrolled further. Subscriptions to multiple streaming services. Uber Eats and DoorDash orders from expensive restaurants during work hours, when she was at the office. Over the last 2 months, about $1,000 had been spent purely on entertainment. While she was skipping lunches and taking the train instead of an Uber to save money, Mark was spending it on games. Her phone rang. It was Brenda. Her mother-in-law called 3 times a week, and every conversation ended with a request for money. Laura, sweetheart, hello. How are you? How's work? Hello. Everything's fine, just very busy right now. I understand. Listen, a little problem has come up. You remember my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson? She needs an emergency surgery, a women's issue. She has no money at all, just a small pension. I promised her I'd help. She needs $500. Laura closed her eyes. A month ago, Brenda had asked for $400 for a plumber. 2 months ago, $600 for prescription medications. Before that, $800 for repairs at her cabin upstate. Each time, she promised to pay it back. She never did. Brenda, I really can't right now, but I'll bring it by this evening. Oh, thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. Mrs. Peterson will be so grateful. Laura hung up and checked the time. 3 p.m. If she left early, claiming a client meeting, she could get to her mother-in-law's place before she was expected, just to check. 40 minutes later, Laura was standing at Brenda's apartment door. She rang the bell. Her mother-in-law opened it, clearly surprised. Laura, I thought you were coming tonight. My meeting nearby ended early, so I decided to stop by. Laura walked into the apartment. Brenda looked perfectly fine, with no hint of concern for a neighbor's health on her face. An open laptop sat on the kitchen table. Brenda quickly shut the lid, but Laura had already seen the website for a high-end department store. On the screen was a designer winter coat priced at $2,000. Where's Mrs. Peterson? Maybe I should give her the money directly. Brenda hesitated for a second. Oh, she's already at the hospital, checking in for pre-op. It's better if you give it to me. I'll take it to her tomorrow. I see. Well, in that case, I'll come back tonight as we planned. I still have some errands to run. Laura left before her mother-in-law could recover. In the elevator, she pulled out her phone and called the information desk at the local hospital. She gave them Mrs. Peterson's name, confirming the last name with the building's doorman, who knew all the residents. The hospital had no patient by that name. The neighbor's surgery was just another lie to get money for a coat. The next day, Laura decided to verify another detail that had been bothering her. Mark had told her that before the layoff, he worked as a programmer at a mid-sized tech company. 5 years of experience, good projects, excellent references. The layoff was sudden. The company was relocating to Austin, and some employees didn't want to move. Laura found the address of that company in a year-old email from her husband, took a few hours of PTO, and drove there. The office was in a modern corporate park on the outskirts of the city. She went up to the right floor and approached the reception desk. A security guard politely asked the purpose of her visit. Hello. I'm Mark Collins's wife. He used to work here until recently. I wanted to pick up some personal items he left in his office. The guard frowned, opened a program on his computer, and typed in the name. I'm sorry, but we don't have an employee by that name in our database. Are you sure it's the right company? Yes, definitely here. Mark Collins, software engineer. The guard shook his head. Our database has all employees from the last 10 years. No one by that name has ever worked here. Maybe he was an independent contractor, but then he wouldn't have had a dedicated office. Laura thanked him and left. A single word hammered in her head. Liar. Mark had lied about his job. He probably never even worked there, which meant there was no layoff. But then where did his money come from before their wedding? Or did he work somewhere completely different and lie to seem more successful? The questions were piling up. That evening, when Laura got home, Mark was sitting in the kitchen with his phone. Hearing her footsteps, he looked up. Hey, how was your day? Fine, just tired. Laura went to the bathroom, washed her face, and changed. Mark stayed in the kitchen. She heard him talking on the phone, then laughing. Returning to the kitchen for a glass of water, she noticed he'd left his phone on the table and stepped out onto the balcony for a smoke. Laura wasn't one to snoop through other people's things, not even her husband's. But now, too many things didn't add up. She quickly grabbed the phone. There was no passcode. Mark never locked his screen at home. She opened his messages and found the text thread with his mother. Messages from today. Brenda had written, Honey, I told her about the neighbor's surgery. I think she'll give it to me. You know, I'm short for my Florida trip. A trip, not a coat. But the essence was the same. A lie. Mark's reply made Laura's blood run cold. Mom, just be careful. She's been acting suspicious lately. The last thing we need is for the cash cow to dry up. Cash cow. Laura quickly took a screenshot of the exchange and sent it to her own email. Then she scrolled further up. Messages from a month ago from her mother-in-law. Son, when are you going to get a real job? She's going to start asking questions soon. His reply, Mom, I told you, I'm fine like this. Why stress when I can live comfortably? I'll find something later, whenever she starts getting really annoying about it. The balcony door began to open. Laura put the phone back down and quickly picked up a glass, filling it with water. Mark came back in and noticed nothing. She drank the water and went to their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed for a full 10 minutes, processing the information. The entire picture came together. Mark wasn't looking for a job at all. He was intentionally dragging it out, living on her dime, and his mother was helping him. Worse, they both treated her as a mere source of income to be carefully milked. For 5 months she had believed him, supported him, economized on herself, and he was just using her. The next day, Laura got up earlier than usual. Mark was still asleep. She got dressed and left the apartment quietly so as not to wake him. On her way to work, she went to a branch of a completely different bank, not the one where they had joint accounts, and opened a new checking account solely in her name, to which her husband would have zero access. The banker set everything up in 20 minutes. At the office, Laura worked as usual, but in the back of her mind, she was forming a plan. That evening, she called the estate attorney in Cleveland to clarify the inheritance details. The paperwork would be ready to sign in 2 weeks. The condo would be cleared of her late aunt's belongings a week after that. A total of 3 weeks. She had to get everything organized by then. Laura started transferring money from her primary account to the new one, in small increments of $500 or $1,000, so as not to arouse suspicion. Mark had access to the transaction history on their joint account, but she always kept her personal salary account separate. Every day, she moved a little more, until she had accumulated a safety net of $30,000 in the hidden account. That would be enough for the transition. At the same time, she began quietly removing her belongings from the apartment. Nothing obvious, just the most necessary and valuable items. Her documents, jewelry, favorite books, photographs. She packed them into a large duffel bag and took them to her colleague Chloe, a friend of many years. Chloe was the only one who knew about Laura's plans and fully supported her. "You're doing the right thing," Chloe told her. "You can't let people use you like that. They won't change." Laura hadn't shared every dirty detail, just the broad strokes. Chloe understood enough and offered her basement storage for as long as needed. A week passed. Mark suspected nothing. He continued his morning routine of leaving the house for interviews, returning by lunchtime to talk about new openings, demanding employers, and how hard it was to find a decent position. Brenda called every other day, but Laura started telling her that money was tight right now and she'd have to wait until her quarterly bonus. Her mother-in-law acted offended, but didn't push too hard yet. One evening, Laura sat in the kitchen with her laptop, pretending to work on a financial model. In reality, she was researching the job market and living costs in Cleveland. She could live in the inherited condo, though it needed renovations, so renting a small place temporarily might be better. She would decide later. Mark came out of the bedroom and went to the fridge. "Hey, let's go over to my mom's on Saturday. She invited us for a barbecue, a little relaxing. I can't. This report is due. I have to close out the quarter. Work again. You need to relax sometimes, you know." Laura looked up at her husband. He stood there, holding a bottle of juice, looking perfectly relaxed and content with life. A man who hadn't worked in 5 months was telling her she needed to relax. She bit back a sarcastic comment. Next time, for sure. The next day, an event occurred that permanently cemented Laura's decision. She was walking back from lunch and saw Mark across the street. He was walking with 2 other men. All 3 were laughing and looked entirely carefree. It was about 3 p.m. Laura slowed her pace, watching from a distance. They walked into a large entertainment complex with a bowling alley and arcade. Laura waited 5 minutes and went inside. The place wasn't crowded. She quickly spotted Mark and his friends. They had rented a bowling lane, ordered pitchers of beer and appetizers, and were chatting merrily. One of the men said something, and Mark burst out laughing, clapping him on the shoulder. This was his interview. This was his job search. Laura slipped out of the building so she wouldn't be seen, returned to the office, and couldn't focus on work for the rest of the day. That evening, Mark came home acting completely normal. He mentioned he had an interview at a startup, but the project just wasn't the right fit. 3 days later, Brenda called again. This time her voice was sharp, lacking its usual sugary sweetness. Laura, I need money. Immediately. $400. For what? That's none of your business. I asked for it. You need to give it to me. We're family. Brenda, I really don't have that kind of extra cash right now. What do you mean you don't? You have a great job. You make good money. Are you really that stingy with your family? It's not about being stingy. I just genuinely don't have it. But you have it for yourself, don't you? I saw you bought a new handbag recently. The handbag was 2 years old, but Laura didn't bother arguing. I'm sorry, I can't help. Brenda hung up on her. 10 minutes later, Mark called. What did you say to my mom? She's in tears. I didn't say anything. I just said no to the money. How could you say no to her? She's my mother. Mark, I don't have extra money. I'm the only one paying for the apartment, for food, for everything. Well, you have a job, and I'm looking right now. It's temporary. It's been 5 months of temporary. What? Are you throwing it in my face? I'm trying to find a decent position, not just grab the first thing that comes along. Laura hung up. It was useless. He called back a minute later, but she didn't answer. She texted, I'm tired, we'll talk at home. There was no reply. That evening, Mark met her with silence, pointedly sitting in the spare room with the door closed. Laura didn't try to clear the air. She ate dinner, took a shower, and went to sleep. He only came to bed after midnight. A few more days of tense silence passed. Laura continued to pack her things, transfer money, and prepare. It was less than a week until her trip to Cleveland for the inheritance papers. She had mapped out the sequence in her head, finalized the condo, file for divorce, quit her job, and move. She could easily find work as a financial analyst in Cleveland. Even if the pay was a bit lower, the cost of living was much cheaper. On Thursday evening, Mark suddenly broke the silence. Look, let's not fight. I understand it's hard for you to carry everything alone right now. I really am trying to find a job. Laura looked at him. He sat on the couch, his face a mask of sincere remorse. All right, Mom is stressed too. She didn't mean to offend you. I see. So, maybe you could help her out? Just a little bit. She really needs it. What does she need it for? Mark hesitated. She needs to make a payment on a property. The deadline is coming up. Laura frowned. What property? She bought a small condo 3 years ago, as an investment. She wanted to rent it out and use that to cover the mortgage, but it fell through. The tenants moved out. Why am I only hearing about this now? Well, Mom didn't want to bother you. She thought she could handle it. And how much does she need? $15,000. It's a balloon payment. It's due once a year. Laura leaned back against the couch. $15,000. And she just assumed I would hand over that kind of cash. Well, she's family. We have to help. Mark, I don't have that kind of money. What do you mean? You have a great salary. You must have savings. My savings have gone toward keeping us afloat for the last 5 months. He scowled. So you're refusing to help my mother? I can't give what I don't have. Mark stood up and paced the room. You know, you've become a completely different person lately, cold and heartless. Laura said nothing. There was no point in arguing. She got up and went to the bathroom. Standing under the hot shower, she realized, I'm doing the right thing, just a little longer. And she would be free of all of this. The next morning, she woke up with a clear plan. It was Friday. On Monday, she had to go to Cleveland. That meant today, she would hand in her resignation. Her boss would probably ask her to stay on for a week or 2 to transition. That was standard. She would wrap up her projects, hand them off, and then freedom. Laura got dressed and had breakfast. Mark was still asleep. She left the apartment with the distinct feeling that a new life was beginning. In her bag was the resignation letter she had written weeks ago in that coffee shop. On Monday morning, Laura boarded an Amtrak train to Cleveland. Mark didn't even ask where she was going. She just told him it was a 2-day business trip. He nodded and went back to his laptop. The city greeted her with a gray sky and a chilling breeze. The attorney's office was in an older building downtown. Miss Albright turned out to be a sharp woman in her 60s. She laid out the documents on the desk and explained the probate process. The condo was paid off, no liens, no debts. The bank funds would be released in a few weeks. It was straightforward. Laura signed the necessary paperwork. The attorney handed over the keys. The address was just outside the downtown core, a 5-story brick building from the 1980s. Laura took an Uber, went up to the 3rd floor, and unlocked the door. The smell of old age and mothballs hit her immediately. The place needed a serious, deep clean and cosmetic updates, but the layout was great, and the windows faced a quiet courtyard. It was definitely livable. She spent an hour there, taking measurements and assessing the work needed, then locked up and headed back to the train station. On the train ride home, she pulled out her phone and started searching for family law attorneys in Chicago. She found a firm with stellar reviews and booked a consultation for Wednesday evening. Returning to Chicago, Laura got home late. Mark was sitting in front of the TV with a beer. How was the trip? Fine. Exhausting. She went straight to the bedroom, lay down in her clothes, closed her eyes, and thought about how in just a few weeks, all of this would be behind her. On Wednesday, after work, Laura went to the lawyer's office. It was a boutique firm on the 2nd floor of a commercial building. She was met by a woman in her 50s, wearing a sharp suit, who introduced herself as Irene Sterling. She offered Laura coffee, but Laura declined and got straight to the point. Her husband hadn't worked in 5 months and was lying about job hunting. His mother constantly demanded money. She had proof of the deception, wanted a divorce, and was moving out of state. She needed to know how to execute this legally. Irene listened carefully, nodding, then asked a few clarifying questions. The apartment you live in, whose name is on the lease? Mine. I signed it 2 years before we got married. Any joint assets? Real estate? No. Everything was bought with my money. I have all the receipts and bank statements. Any joint debt? No. Children? No. The lawyer leaned back in her chair. Your case is remarkably straightforward from a legal standpoint. There are virtually no marital assets to divide. Since everything is in your name, and you have the paper trail to prove you acquired it, there's nothing to split. File for a no-fault divorce. It will take a few months to finalize. He might theoretically try to claim spousal support, but given that he's fully capable of working and you have proof he's actively avoiding employment, the judge will almost certainly deny it. Understood. One crucial thing. Before you file, secure your finances. Remove his access to any of your accounts. Move your money to new ones he doesn't know about. Once you file, the manipulation and pressure will escalate. Be prepared. Laura nodded. She had already moved most of her money. Irene looked at her seriously, and most importantly, do not tell them anything until the absolute last minute. Let them think everything is normal, otherwise they'll have time to prepare and retaliate. The element of surprise is your best asset. Laura left the consultation with a clear roadmap. It cost her $300, but it was worth every penny. The next day, something unexpected happened. Mark came home in the evening looking ecstatic. You won't believe it. I finally got an offer. Laura looked up from her laptop. Where? An IT consulting firm. Enterprise software. Salary is $100,000. I start in a week. He looked genuinely thrilled and even hugged her. Laura faked a smile. That's amazing. Congratulations. See, I knew you'd find something. What's the company called? Tech Pro Solutions. They're newer, but growing fast. What will you be doing? Developing internal systems for financial clients. It's a really cool project. Laura nodded, asking questions, while Mark eagerly shared the details, clearly soaking up the moment. Then he went to the other room to call his mother with the news. The following day on her lunch break, Laura looked up Tech Pro Solutions online. She called their main office, introduced herself as a bank underwriter, and said she needed to verify employment for a loan applicant named Mark Collins. The receptionist politely informed her they had no employee by that name. Perhaps he hasn't officially started yet. A new hire. No, I'm looking at the onboarding roster for the next month. There's no Mark Collins. Laura thanked her and hung up. Another lie, and an incredibly lazy one at that. He hadn't even bothered to pick a company that would corroborate his story. He just threw out a name, assuming she'd never check. That evening he kept up the charade, talking about his future colleagues, the commute, the tech stack. Laura played along, nodding. A week from now, when he was supposed to start, he would inevitably invent a new excuse. The funding fell through. The position was eliminated. Whatever. But Laura wouldn't be around to hear it. On Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Laura answered it to find Brenda standing there with a grim expression. She marched inside without even saying hello. "We need to talk." Mark came out of the bedroom. "Mom? What happened?" They went into the living room and sat down. Brenda pulled some documents from her purse. "I need to make the payment on my mortgage. $15,000. It's due in 5 days." Laura frowned. "What mortgage?" Her mother-in-law looked at her like she was an idiot. "I bought a condo 3 years ago. A 1-bedroom in the suburbs. I was going to rent it out, let the rent cover the loan, but the tenants left 6 months ago and I can't find new ones. The balloon payment is due. Why didn't I know about this? Why did you need to know? It's my business. But now you're here asking for money." Brenda sat up straight. "We are family. Family helps family. Or are you going to turn your back on us in an emergency?" Laura looked at her, then at Mark. He sat silently, staring at the floor. "I need to think about it." "What is there to think about? Someone is in trouble. They need help. Or are you just that greedy?" "It's not about greed. Then what is it?" "You have a huge salary." Laura stood up. "I said I'll think about it and give you an answer later." Brenda scoffed in outrage, but didn't push further. She packed up her papers and left, slamming the door. Mark remained on the couch. "Are you really going to refuse her?" Laura looked at him. "I don't have that kind of money. You have a job. You could take out a personal loan. To pay off her mortgage? It's my mom. We can't just abandon her." Laura turned and walked into the bedroom, closing the door. She sat on the bed. She was boiling inside, but managed to keep a calm exterior. $15,000 for a secret real estate investment she was never told about, and now they demanded she bail them out as if it were her duty. She texted Chloe, asking if she could bring over a few more boxes. "Of course, come whenever," Chloe replied. The following week, Laura actively moved her life out of the apartment. Every morning she packed a gym bag with clothes, shoes, and toiletries. She left early, while Mark was sleeping, and came back empty-handed. He noticed absolutely nothing. His world was confined to his computer monitor in the spare room. Whatever happened in the rest of the apartment was of no interest to him. By the end of the week, she had moved almost everything of value. Chloe let her use half of her garage. On Thursday evening, Laura stopped by the grocery store. While standing in the checkout line, she heard a familiar voice. She turned around. At the next register was a woman she recognized from Facebook photos belonging to Kevin, one of Mark's friends. Kevin's wife or ex-wife, Laura wasn't entirely sure. Their eyes met. The woman recognized Laura too, and gave a slight nod. They walked out of the store at the same time. Laura took a chance. "Excuse me, we haven't officially met, but I recognize you from photos. You're Kate, Kevin's wife." The woman chuckled bitterly. "Ex-wife. We divorced a year ago." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." "It's fine. You're Laura? Mark's wife?" "Yes." They stood near the exit. Kate looked at her closely. "How are things with you?" Laura didn't know what to say. Kate seemed to sense her hesitation. "Listen, let's grab a coffee. There's a Starbucks right there. We might have some things to discuss." 10 minutes later, they were sitting at a table. They sat in silence for a moment before Kate spoke up. "You know, I divorced Kevin because he refused to work for 3 years. He constantly claimed he was looking, that he was right on the verge of an offer. I believed him, supported us entirely on my own. Then I found out the truth. What truth? He, your husband, and a few other guys, about 5 of them in total, would get on Discord every day. They played games and actively discussed strategies on how to manipulate their wives. Kevin left his iPad unlocked one day, and I saw the group chat. They were swapping tips on how to handle it when their wives started getting suspicious. It was an entire system. Laura felt her blood run cold. Are you serious? Dead serious. I checked and found all the proof. They even acted as references for each other. One guy would call playing the role of a recruiter, while the husband would put on an act for the wife in the living room. They completely covered for each other. And Mark was right in the middle of it. One of the most active ones. Laura took a sip of her coffee. Her hand was shaking slightly. Kate noticed. You suspected something? Yes, but I thought it was just him being lazy. I had no idea it was an organized ring. They're all the same. The wives work and bring home the bacon, and they sit at home playing games while whining about how grueling the job market is. Kate pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. Look, these are screenshots I took for my divorce lawyer. Laura stared at the screen. The usernames were obvious. Kevin, Mark, Adam, Greg, Mike. Messages about how to best fake exhaustion after a long day of interviews, which excuses worked best for rejections. One of them wrote, "The trick is to leave printed job listings on the kitchen counter." She sees I'm putting in the work and backs off. Mark's reply, "My wife doesn't even check anymore. It's so easy." Laura handed the phone back. "Thank you for telling me. I just felt you needed to know. When I found out, I realized I had wasted 3 years of my life. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." They finished their coffee and exchanged phone numbers. Kate wished her luck and left. Laura sat there for another 10 minutes, processing. It wasn't just Mark being a deadbeat. It was a calculated, shared strategy. They literally coached each other on how to act like parasites without feeling an ounce of guilt. She drove home. Mark was in the kitchen eating a sandwich, watching a YouTube video on his iPad. He saw her and smiled. "Hey, you were gone a while." Ran into an acquaintance, got to talking. "Right. Listen," Mom called again about that money. "I'm still thinking about it." "Well, think faster. Her deadline is coming up." Laura walked right past him into the bedroom, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. Just a little more patience. On Friday morning, she told Mark she had a corporate event after work and would be home close to midnight. He nodded, not even asking for details. She went to work, but took the afternoon off. She left the office, got in her car, and drove home. It was 2 p.m. She parked, went up to her floor, and quietly unlocked the front door. Loud voices and laughter echoed from the living room. Several male voices. Laura slipped off her shoes, crept down the hallway, and peeked around the corner. Mark was on the couch with 2 other guys. Beer bottles and a family-sized bag of chips covered the coffee table. They all had headsets on, playing a co-op shooter on the TV. One of the men, Laura recognized him as Kevin from the photos, laughed loudly. "Dude, Mark, does your wife really have no clue you're full of shit?" Mark chuckled. "She's clueless. You just gotta whine about how burnt out you are from applying. Flash a fake rejection email, and she thinks I'm grinding out there. I got it made. Lucky bastard. My ex was up my ass constantly by the end. You just got sloppy, man. Gotta play the game right." Laura stood in the hallway, her hands balled into fists, but she kept her composure. She had heard enough. She quietly backed out, locked the door, went downstairs to her car, and drove to a mall near her office. She spent the rest of the day browsing bookstores and sitting in a cafe. She returned home at 10 p.m. Mark was alone, watching Netflix. How was the party? Fine. I'm exhausted. She took a long shower and went to bed. Mark came in an hour later. Laura pretended to be asleep. The next day, she met with Chloe and described exactly what she had witnessed. "That's it. I'm done. Not another day. What's the plan? Monday, I give my notice. I'll take 2 weeks to transition my projects. During that time, I finalize the condo in Ohio, pack my last few things, and leave. He won't know until the absolute last second." Chloe nodded. "Good. Let him finally face some consequences. On Sunday, Laura got an email from a firm in Cleveland. A month ago, she had sent out resumes just to test the waters. A large regional construction firm offered her a finance director position at $160,000 a year. It was actually a pay bump, and given Ohio's cost of living, she'd be much better off. They agreed she could work remotely for the first 3 months before relocating permanently. She accepted, starting the first of the month. Everything was set. The job was secure. The condo was hers. The money was in a safe account, and her belongings were gone. The lawyer had drafted the papers. It was time for the final strike. Monday morning, Laura woke up at 6 a.m. Mark was sleeping. She got dressed, grabbed her bag, which contained the resignation letter she had drafted weeks ago, and looked at her husband. She felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a hollow space where her love used to be. At the office, she went straight to her boss, Mr. Davis. He was stunned. Laura, did something happen? She handed him the letter. I'm resigning, effective in 2 weeks. He read the paper. But why? You're thriving here. Your projects are flawless. Personal reasons. I'm relocating out of state. We can discuss remote work, a salary bump. Thank you, but my decision is final. Mr. Davis sighed. It's a huge loss for us, but all right, we'll start the transition. Laura spent the next 2 weeks working harder than ever, meticulously handing over her models and reports to her team so she wouldn't leave them in a bind. She told Mark she was slammed with quarter-end work and staying late. He didn't care, continuing his routine of gaming, hanging out with his friends, and pretending to apply for jobs. On her final Friday, her team threw a small farewell lunch with cake and champagne. Chloe hugged her tight. Stay strong. You're a total badass. Laura packed her final HR paperwork and a few desk trinkets into a box and left the building at 6 p.m. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the high-rise she had walked into every day for 5 years. That chapter was officially closed. She drove home and walked into the apartment. Mark was in the kitchen with his iPad, eating a sandwich. Hey, how was work? Laura put her box down on the floor and looked at him. Great, I quit. Mark looked up, freezing. What? I quit my job. Today was my last day. His face twisted in confusion. Is this a joke? No. Wait, what do you mean you quit? Are you insane? Yes, completely. Resigned. Mark stood up, dropping his sandwich. What the hell are you doing? We have rent, bills, expenses. How are we going to survive? Laura calmly took off her coat and hung it up. You have rent and bills. I was just living here. What the hell are you talking about? We're married. Mark snatched his phone off the table and started dialing frantically. Laura heard it ringing, and then Brenda's voice. Mom, she quit her job. Just completely quit. What the hell are we supposed to do? Laura walked into the bedroom, pulled out her phone, and opened her banking app. Mark was pacing the hallway, hyperventilating to his mother. Methodically, Laura went into the joint account settings, revoked Mark's authorized user access, froze all the joint debit and credit cards, and locked him out of the portal entirely. Mark walked back into the room, phone still at his ear. He saw her tapping on her screen, stepped closer to look over her shoulder, and went completely pale. What are you doing? What I should have done 5 months ago. He lunged and grabbed the phone out of her hands. Laura didn't resist. Mark stared at the screen, swiping frantically. His face drained of all color. You blocked the cards. You took me off the account. How am I supposed to buy anything? It's my money, Mark. My account. You never had any right to it. But we're husband and wife. Not for much longer. Brenda was screaming something through the phone speaker. Laura could hear her from across the room. Mark put the phone back to his ear. Yeah, Mom. She locked me out of everything. I don't know. Just get over here. Yes. He threw the phone on the bed and glared at Laura with pure hatred. You ruined everything. No. I fixed everything. The next 20 minutes passed in suffocating silence. Mark paced the apartment, chain smoking on the balcony, texting furiously. Laura sat in the kitchen, sipping tea. She felt incredibly peaceful. Finally, The doorbell rang harsh, aggressive, buzzing. Mark rushed to open it. Brenda barged in, her face bright red, panting heavily. "Where is she? Where is she?" Laura stepped into the hallway. Her mother-in-law lunged at her, screaming, "You stupid girl. How dare you quit your job and block the cards? Who's going to pay my mortgage now? And who's going to support my son? He's unemployed too." Laura looked at her with absolute calm. Brenda kept screeching and waving her arms while Mark stood behind her, silent. "But you couldn't even imagine what I was about to do next," Laura said quietly. She turned, walked into the guest room, and re-emerged a minute later rolling 2 massive suitcases. She parked them in the hallway. "These are your things, Mark. Your clothes, shoes, and documents. And Brenda, this bag has the robes, slippers, and cosmetics you left here." Brenda opened her mouth, but Laura held up a hand. She pulled a thick manila folder from her tote bag. "This is a petition for divorce. It gets filed on Monday morning." She dropped a paper on the suitcase. "These are printed screenshots of your text messages where you call me a cash cow and strategize on how to milk me." She dropped the second paper. "This is an email confirming that Mark never worked for the IT firm he claimed to be laid off from. He was never in their system." Third paper. "This is confirmation that nobody at TechPro Solutions has ever heard of him." Fourth paper. "This is a bank statement showing $1,000 spent on video games and Uber Eats over the last 2 months. Fifth paper. "And finally, this is the lease agreement for this apartment. It is solely in my name. I rented this place 2 years before we were married. Mark is not on the lease, and never has been. He was an authorized guest, and that authorization is now revoked." Laura looked up and met their stunned eyes. "You have exactly 1 hour to take your bags and leave this property. Otherwise, I am calling the police and having you formally removed for trespassing." Brenda froze, processing, and then lunged at Laura with closed fists. Laura simply stepped aside and shoved her back by the shoulders. "Don't. You will only catch an assault charge." Mark suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling. "You ruined everything. We had it so good. Why are you doing this?" Laura turned to him. "You had it good. You lived on my dime, lied to my face, manipulated me, and I was dumb enough to believe it." Mark suddenly dropped to his knees, grabbing her hand. "Please, I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I'll get a real job, I swear. I'll be different. Just give me one more chance." Laura looked down at him. There were real tears streaming down his face. He looked utterly pathetic. "You're lying even right now. Get up. It's embarrassing." "Laura, please. I love you. You love my direct deposit." The doorbell rang again. Laura stepped around her kneeling husband and opened the door. 2 massive guys stood in the hallway. She had asked Chloe to arrange this a week ago. They were Chloe's brothers, both former college linebackers. "Hey guys, come on in." The brothers walked in silently, took one look at the situation, grabbed the suitcases, and hauled them out into the elevator lobby. Mark jumped up from his knees. "This is illegal. This is my home. I live here." Laura pulled one more paper from the folder. "No, you don't. Here's a printout from the post office and the DMV. Your legal residence is your mother's address. Check it yourself. I just let you stay here. Now." "I don't." Brenda suddenly started gasping for air, clutching her chest. "My heart. I'm having a heart attack. Call 911. "I'll be happy to call the paramedics," Laura said smoothly. "But they'll just tell you exactly what your medical chart says. You have a perfectly healthy heart." "I checked." Brenda's hand slowly dropped from her chest. "I'm going to sue you. I'm going to tell everyone what a monster you are. They'll fire you in disgrace. I already quit. Tell whoever you want. I have the group chat screenshots and audio of your manipulations. What do you have?" One of the brothers stepped back and sighed. "Bags are downstairs. Anything else need moving?" Laura looked around. "Mark, do you have any other personal items?" He stood there, fists clenched, staring at the floor. "Then we're done. You can go." "You're going to regret this," Mark rasped. "You're really going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing it 5 months ago." Mark and Brenda stood there for another agonizing minute, then turned and walked out. The door clicked shut. "You need anything else?" one of the brothers asked. "No, thank you so much. You guys saved me." They left, and Laura locked the deadbolt and the chain. She leaned her back against the door and closed her eyes. Silence. For the first time in months, absolute peace. She walked into the living room and opened the window. The crisp October wind swept through the apartment. Laura took a deep breath. She was free. On Monday, her lawyer filed the divorce papers. Mark tried calling her 20 times and blew up her texts. Laura didn't respond and blocked his number, as well as Brenda's. 3 days later, she drove to Cleveland. The condo still needed renovations, but it was functional. She hired a local contracting crew to paint, redo the floors, and update the plumbing. It would take a month. Meanwhile, she rented a cheap studio apartment in a new development, officially started her new job, and got her corporate laptop and credentials. For the first 3 months, she worked fully remote. The pay was great, and because she owned the condo outright, she'd soon be living rent-free. A week passed, then another. Life settled into a comfortable, new routine. Laura woke up without that heavy anxiety in her chest. She did her job without wondering who was secretly draining her bank accounts. In the evenings, she explored her new city, finding local coffee shops, parks, and restaurants. One evening, while she was sitting in her studio apartment working on her laptop, her phone rang. It was an unknown Chicago number. She answered. "Laura? It's me." It was Mark. His voice was trembling and weak. "How did you get this number?" "It doesn't matter. Listen. I need to talk to you. It's an emergency. We have nothing to talk about." "Wait, don't hang up. My mom is in the hospital." Laura froze. What happened? Her heart. The stress from everything. She had a severe episode. "The doctors are saying she needs emergency bypass surgery, and we don't have the insurance to cover it. We need $20,000 upfront. Laura, please. I know we messed up, but she could literally die. You don't want that on your conscience." "Stop." Laura opened a new tab on her browser and quickly searched the directory for the main hospital in Brenda's Chicago suburb. What hospital is she at? Mercy General, the cardiology wing. Laura found the number for the nurse's station, picked up her work phone, dialed it, and put it on speaker so Mark could hear. A nurse answered. Laura introduced herself as a family member and asked for the status of Brenda Collins. The nurse typed on her keyboard. "I'm sorry. We don't have a patient admitted by that name. Are you sure?" "I was told the cardiology wing." "Hold on." "Ah, I see. Brenda Collins had a routine outpatient appointment with a cardiologist 2 days ago, but she wasn't admitted. Is she healthy?" "I can't share exact medical details, but the doctor's notes indicate cleared, no acute pathologies, just a minor, benign arrhythmia that requires no treatment." "Thank you." Laura picked up her cell phone. "Did you hear that?" Silence on the other end. "Mark, I asked if you heard that." "Laura, wait. Listen. Your mother is perfectly healthy. It was a routine checkup. There is no surgery. The doctors could be wrong. They make mistakes. Even if they did, it's not my problem anymore. You made your choices. I made mine." "Laura, how can you be so heartless? Don't you have a drop of sympathy?" "My sympathy dried up the second I read your group chat. Cash cow. Remember?" She hung up, blocked the new number, closed her laptop, and walked out onto the balcony. The city skyline was unfamiliar, but no longer intimidating. Cleveland was slowly becoming home. 3 weeks later, the contractors finished the condo. Laura moved in with the boxes she had shipped from Chloe's, buying basic furniture from IKEA, a couch, a desk, a bed. It was minimalist, but it was hers. Work was going incredibly well. Her executives loved her financial modeling, and she was invited to transition to the local Ohio office ahead of schedule. She agreed, met her new team, and immediately hit it off with a woman named Emily, a senior analyst who invited her out to lunch. "You from Chicago originally?" Emily asked. "Yeah. Just moved here recently." "Why Cleveland?" "Inherited a place. Needed a fresh start." "I get that. How do you like it so far?" "It's peaceful. I like it." They became fast friends. Emily was a single mom who had been through a rough divorce herself. She didn't pry, but she understood the feeling of starting over. A month later, Laura got a letter from the Chicago family court. Mark had filed a countersuit. He was demanding a division of assets, compensation for emotional distress, and spousal support, claiming he was an impoverished dependent. Laura called Irene Sterling. "Don't worry," Irene said. "He has zero legal standing. You own the assets, you have the proof." Emotional distress is a joke considering we submitted the Discord transcripts. And spousal alimony? He's an able-bodied man who voluntarily chose not to work. The judge will throw it out. And she did. The hearing was swift. Mark showed up with a cheap lawyer, likely paid for with his mother's last dime. The lawyer tried to grandstand about marital obligations and family values. The judge asked for their evidence of financial contribution. They had none. Laura's lawyer presented the wire transfers, the lease, the fake job emails, and the group chat logs. The judge granted the divorce, awarded Mark nothing, and denied spousal support. Mark didn't appeal. He couldn't afford to. A month later, Laura received her finalized divorce decree in the mail, officially free. 6 months went by. Winter melted into a beautiful Midwestern spring. Laura was fully settled in Cleveland. She got a performance raise, pushing her salary up to $180,000. She had a solid friend group, a favorite local coffee shop, and a life that was quiet, predictable, and safe. One Saturday, she was standing in the checkout line at a Target when she heard someone say her name. She turned around. It was Kate, Kevin's ex-wife. "Laura." "Oh my God." They hugged. "What are you doing in Ohio?" Laura asked. "Visiting my sister." "Wow. It's so crazy to see you. How are things?" "Great, honestly. New job, new city, peaceful." They grabbed a coffee near the exit. "Listen, I've been meaning to text you," Kate said. "Remember that Discord server I told you about? Hard to forget. Well, I managed to track down the other wives from that group chat. 3 of them filed for divorce after I showed them the screenshots. 2 more are currently looking into lawyers. We made our own private WhatsApp group to support each other through the legal mess. Do you want to join?" Laura thought about it. "I'm in a different state now. It's just a group chat. You don't have to meet up. It's just nice to talk to people who get it." "Sure, why not?" Kate added her. There were 8 women in the group, all different ages, from different cities, but they all shared the exact same trauma. Husbands who refused to work, lied about interviews, drained their finances, and emotionally manipulated them with the help of toxic mothers-in-law. One woman wrote, "The hardest part is realizing they never actually loved you. You were just a utility to them." Another replied, "Yeah, but the best part is that we're free now and we'll never let anyone treat us like an ATM again." Laura typed her first message. "The most important thing is not to mourn the lost time. We learned our lesson. We survived." Gradually, she became a regular in the chat, offering advice to the women just starting the divorce process and sharing her story. It felt incredibly validating. A few weeks later, Kate DM'd her privately. "Hey, got some gossip. Remember your ex? Unfortunately." "What about him?" "He found a new girl. She's 23. Works as a shift manager at a retail store. He already moved into her apartment." Laura stared at the text. "How do you know?" "Saw them at the mall in Chicago. He was spinning some massive web of BS, and she was looking at him with literal stars in her eyes. I recognized her. She's a friend of my neighbor. Do you want me to warn her?" Laura sat back and thought. Part of her wanted to save the poor girl from the nightmare, but another part knew exactly how it would play out. Would a 2-3-year-old in love believe a random warning from an ex-wife, or would she just assume it was a jealous, bitter ex trying to ruin her happiness? Mark had probably already fed her a sob story about his crazy, abusive ex-wife. "No," Laura typed back. "Don't. Are you sure?" "Yes. Some lessons you have to learn the hard way. If you warn her, she won't believe you. She has to see the red flags herself. I guess. I just feel bad for the kid. I do too. But it's her life." Laura locked her phone and walked over to her living room window. The Cleveland skyline glowed warmly in the twilight. It wasn't Chicago, but it was home. Her life wasn't a fairy tale, her sink still leaked sometimes, work was still stressful, and the weekends could occasionally feel a little lonely. She missed having a family sometimes. But her mother had passed away years ago. She had no siblings, and her old life was built on a foundation of sand. Quote, sometimes, in the dead of night, she would wake up with a fleeting pang of doubt, wondering if maybe she should have tried couples therapy or given Mark one last, real chance to change. But then she would remember that audio drifting from her living room. You just gotta whine about how burnt out you are. She thinks I'm grinding. And she knew. Some people don't want second chances. They just want a more compliant victim. They don't change, because the way they are is exactly how they want to be. A month later, Brenda lost her condo. The bank foreclosed on the balloon payment she had defaulted on. Laura heard about it through the WhatsApp grapevine. Brenda was forced to move into the tiny apartment with Mark and his new 3-year-old girlfriend. Laura could vividly imagine the absolute hell that girl was living in right now. Mark gaming on the couch, his mother demanding money, the constant lies. Laura felt no malicious joy, only a deep, exhausted pity. One evening, as Laura sat on her balcony with a glass of wine, her phone buzzed, a message from Kate in the group chat. Hey Laura, just wanted to officially say thank you. If you hadn't validated what I found, I might have thought I was overreacting. 3 divorces finalized. We're all free. Thank you. Laura smiled. She typed back, thank you guys for being there so I didn't feel crazy. We got this. She put her phone down, finished her wine, and enjoyed the cool breeze. Later that night, she dug out an old external hard drive she hadn't touched in months. She plugged it in and opened her photo albums. Vacations with Mark, family dinners with Brenda, their wedding photos. The smiles all looked so incredibly fake now. She methodically deleted every single photo of them together, keeping only the ones where she was alone at a conference in New York, a work trip in Austin, out with Chloe. That was the real her, without the mask, without the burden. The last photo was their wedding day. She in a white dress, him in a tuxedo, both beaming. She stared at the woman in the photo. She was happy, in love, and painfully naive. That woman believed in fairy tales. Laura hit delete and unplugged the drive. Her life now wasn't perfect. The condo needed constant upkeep. Her job demanded late hours. The solitude of a new city was sometimes heavy, but it was honest. There were no lies, no psychological warfare, no financial bleeding. Laura walked out to the hallway and looked at herself in the full-length mirror. She looked exactly the same as she did a year ago, but fundamentally different, stronger, unburdened. This new life didn't promise to be easy, but it promised to be real. And for Laura, that was more than enough. 2 years had passed since Laura stood in front of that hallway mirror in her newly renovated Cleveland condo. True to her own prediction, life hadn't been effortlessly easy, but it had been entirely hers. At the construction firm, Laura's meticulous financial modeling and sharp instincts had paid off. Mr. Davis's counterpart in the Ohio office had retired, and Laura had been promoted to vice president of finance. Her salary had bumped to $210,000, but more importantly, she felt a profound sense of respect from her peers. She was a leader, making decisions that shaped the company's future. The WhatsApp group, originally started by Kate, had blossomed into a tight-knit sisterhood. They called themselves the Next Chapter Club. Last summer, they had all finally met in person, renting a large Airbnb in Nashville for a long weekend. They drank wine, shared their horror stories in person, and celebrated their new lives. During that trip, Kate shared the final update on Mark. The 3-year-old retail manager, Jessica, had wised up much faster than any of them had anticipated. After 8 months of Mark sitting on her couch playing Xbox while his mother complained about the groceries, Jessica had secretly packed their bags while they were out, left them on the porch, and changed the locks. Mark and Brenda were forced to move into a cheap, cramped motel on the outskirts of Chicago. Mark had finally been forced to take a minimum-wage job at a warehouse just to keep a roof over their heads, his days of executive interviews permanently over. Brenda, with her non-existent heart condition, was working the cash register at a local pharmacy. Laura had listened to the update, raised her glass of Pinot Noir, and offered a simple toast to karma. As for Laura's personal life, she had started dating again, but on her own terms. For the past 6 months, she had been seeing a man named Michael, a high school history teacher she met at a local bookstore. He was kind, incredibly hardworking, and completely transparent. He didn't ask for her money, he didn't play games, and he looked at her with genuine admiration. When he came over to her condo, he often brought groceries and cooked dinner for them both, insisting that since she worked such long hours, it was the least he could do. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Michael was in her kitchen, humming softly to the radio as he flipped pancakes. The smell of fresh coffee and vanilla filled the condo. Laura sat on her balcony, wrapped in a cozy blanket, watching the morning sun reflect off the glass of the downtown Cleveland buildings. She opened her phone and checked her bank account not out of anxiety, but out of habit. The numbers were robust, secure, and completely under her control. She put the phone down, took a deep breath of the crisp morning air, and smiled. She had lost years to a lie, but she had gained a lifetime of truth. And as Michael called out from the kitchen that breakfast was ready, Laura knew she wouldn't change a single step of the journey that led her here.